The sea, that vast, shimmering expanse promising adventure and untold riches, often concealed a horrifying truth. The golden age of piracy was a blood-soaked opera where brutality reigned supreme. Forget the swashbuckling heroes of storybooks, the rum-soaked camaraderie of tavern tales. These were mere embellishments on a canvas painted with unimaginable cruelty. Imagine, if you will, a tableau of sun-bleached bones swaying gently in iron cages, the salt spray their constant companion, a silent testament to justice dispensed with a savage hand. This was the true face of piracy, a grim spectacle designed to instill a terror that resonated from the smallest sloop to the grandest man of war. And it is from this unsettling image, this visceral reminder of the abyss that lies beneath the romantic facade, that our tale begins. A tale not of treasure maps and daring raids, but of the calculated cruelty that underpinned a lawless world. For in this realm, where the laws of kings held no sway, a new and far more terrifying order, born of desperation and enforced with unflinching violence. The pirates, castaways from civilization, forged their own system of jurisprudence, a code written not in ink but in the blood of the disobedient. Life aboard these floating fortresses was a precarious dance with death, a constant negotiation with mutiny, where loyalty was bought with fear, and discipline was maintained through methods so appalling they would make the most hardened executioner blanch. We are not speaking of impulsive acts of rage, but of meticulously planned punishments, each designed to break the body, shatter the spirit, and broadcast a chilling message across the waves. These weren't isolated incidents. They were the bedrock upon which pirate society was built, the cornerstone of a system predicated on absolute, unquestioning obedience. The pirate code, often romanticized as a symbol of defiance, was in reality a tool of oppression, a means of maintaining control over a volatile collection of cutthroats, deserters, and escaped slaves. Its enforcement was swift, merciless, and often public, a chilling spectacle designed to deter any whisper of rebellion. From the agonizing crawl beneath the barnacle-encrusted hull of a ship, known as keel hauling, to the slow, agonizing death of marooning on a desolate island, the pirates' arsenal of punishments was designed to inflict maximum suffering, both physical and psychological. These methods, far from being mere folklore, are documented realities, etched into the annals of maritime history, their influence extending far beyond the confines of the pirate ship, shaping naval law and leaving an indelible mark on the evolution of maritime discipline. These punishments served a multitude of purposes. They were designed to crush dissent, stifle mutiny, and create an atmosphere of pervasive fear, allowing captains to maintain absolute control over their crews. The terror wasn't merely physical, it was the psychological precision that truly distinguished pirate executions. Every method was carefully crafted to maximize anguish, transforming the condemned into a public spectacle, a cautionary tale whispered in every port and etched into the collective memory of the seafaring world. Consider the slow, agonizing torment of marooning, a death sentence disguised as a second chance, or the ritualistic humiliation of walking the plank, a forced suicide designed to break the spirit as much as the body. These weren't simply acts of brutality, they were calculated exercises in psychological warfare, designed to instill an unwavering obedience born of sheer terror. Pirates understood that in a world beyond the reach of formal law enforcement, fear was their most potent weapon, the only force capable of maintaining order in a society composed of the desperate and the dangerous. And what makes these historical accounts truly unsettling is their meticulous documentation. Ship logs, court records, survivor testimonies, these provide us with chillingly detailed accounts of these practices, leaving no room for doubt about their authenticity. The sheer volume of evidence, the consistency of the narratives, paints a stark and disturbing picture of life under the skull and crossbones. Maritime historians have painstakingly pieced together the evidence, revealing that these weren't sporadic outbreaks of violence, but rather systematic methods of control employed across the pirate community with chilling uniformity. The consistency of these practices across different crews, different regions, speaks to a shared understanding amongst pirates, a grim consensus on the necessity of extreme measures. This was not the haphazard cruelty of individual sadists. It was a carefully orchestrated system of terror designed to maintain order and ensure the survival of the pirate enterprise. The legacy of pirate justice extends far beyond mere historical curiosity. It is a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human heart, and a testament to the enduring power of fear as a tool of control. Its influence can be traced in the development of maritime law, in the evolution of military discipline, even in the structure of modern correctional institutions. Naval forces around the world, consciously or unconsciously, adopted and adapted aspects of these brutal methods, recognizing their effectiveness in maintaining order at sea. The psychological impact of these punishments created a culture of compliance, a rigid hierarchy that was essential for survival in the unforgiving maritime environment of the 18th century. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this history is how these brutal methods became normalized within pirate society. Men who had fled the constraints of civilization, seeking freedom and opportunity, ended up creating something far worse, a system where mercy was viewed as weakness and brutality was considered a necessity. The psychological conditioning required to participate in or even witness these executions transformed ordinary sailors into instruments of terror. It demonstrates the terrifying speed with which human beings can adapt to extreme circumstances, how quickly we can abandon our moral compass when survival hinges on conforming to violent norms. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the line between civilization and barbarism is far thinner than we might like to believe. Today, as we examine these historical accounts, we are forced to confront unsettling questions about human nature, about the limits of morality, about the darkness that resides within us all. The pirates' methods of execution and punishment weren't simply products of inherent evil. They were desperate attempts to create order in a chaotic world, a world where traditional authority had no power, where the only law was the law of the sword. Understanding these practices, as horrifying as they may be, helps us to appreciate both the brutal realities of maritime life in the 18th century and the incredible resilience of those who somehow managed to survive in such an unforgiving environment. It is a dark chapter in human history, but one that must be studied, not for the sake of morbid fascination, but for the lessons it holds about the enduring power of fear, the fragility of civilization, and the capacity for both cruelty and resilience that resides within the human heart. The origins of these systems of punishment are rooted deep in the maritime history of the era, reflecting the unique pressures and challenges faced by those who lived outside the reach of conventional law. The genesis of pirate punishment systems can be traced back to the unique and often brutal circumstances of 17th and 18th century maritime society, a world where the vast expanse of the ocean rendered traditional legal systems utterly impotent. Pirates, operating in a lawless vacuum, were compelled to create their own brutal codes, born not of inherent sadism, but of stark necessity. Imagine a world without police, without courts, without even the most basic protections afforded by civilization. This was the reality of life at sea, a world where the only law was the law of the strongest. These were men drawn from diverse backgrounds, former naval officers disillusioned by the rigid hierarchies of the Royal Navy, escaped slaves yearning for freedom and revenge, displaced farmers driven from their lands by poverty and famine, and career criminals seeking fortune beyond the reach of the law. What united them was their rejection of conventional society, their willingness to embrace a life outside the boundaries of established order, and their desperate need for survival on the high seas. Consider the former naval officer, accustomed to the brutal discipline of the Royal Navy, finding himself adrift, disillusioned, and drawn to the allure of pirate life. Or the escaped slave, scarred by the lash and driven by an insatiable thirst for vengeance, seeking to turn the tables on his former oppressors. These were not inherently evil men, but rather individuals shaped by the harsh realities of their time, driven to extremes by desperation and circumstance. The Caribbean during this period was a volatile powder keg, a melting pot of competing colonial powers, each vying for control of lucrative trade routes. Spanish treasure fleets laden with gold and silver, English merchant ships carrying valuable goods, and French privateers operating under the protection of their government all clashed and collided in a constant struggle for dominance. Into this chaotic environment stepped the pirates, initially serving as unofficial auxiliaries to various governments, operating under letters of marque that authorized them to attack enemy ships. But as the lines between official sanction and outright piracy blurred, many of these privateers broke free from their governmental ties, becoming independent operators, beholden to no one but themselves. Without the backing of any nation, without the protection of any legal system, these independent pirates were forced to create their own systems of governance, their own codes of conduct to maintain order and ensure their survival. And these systems inevitably reflected the harsh realities of their existence. Pirate crews were essentially floating societies, comprised of some of the most desperate and dangerous men of their era. Many were former military personnel, accustomed to strict discipline and harsh punishments during their service in royal navies. Others were escaped convicts or indentured servants who had experienced brutality firsthand and understood its effectiveness as a tool of control. This background meant that extreme punishments weren't shocking aberrations, but rather natural extensions of what these men already knew, a continuation of the harsh realities they had experienced in their previous lives. Consider the escaped convict, accustomed to the brutal regime of a prison ship, finding himself aboard a pirate vessel, where the punishments, though different in form, were equally harsh and unforgiving. Or the former naval officer, trained to enforce discipline through fear and violence, finding himself in a position of authority on a pirate ship, where he could implement his methods without the constraints of naval regulations. The development of pirate codes wasn't an intellectual exercise, a philosophical debate about the nature of justice. It was a practical necessity, born from the need to maintain order among men who had already rejected conventional authority. These codes had to be severe enough to deter mutiny and theft, while also being flexible enough to allow for the democratic decision-making that many pirate crews employed. The punishments they devised were therefore carefully calibrated to serve multiple functions: deterrence, punishment, and public demonstration of the captain's authority. Consider the dilemma faced by a pirate captain tasked with maintaining order among a crew of hardened criminals, each with his own agenda and his own capacity for violence. He needed a system of laws that was both effective and enforceable, a system that would deter potential troublemakers and ensure the loyalty of his crew. The punishments he devised had to be severe enough to make an impact, but also fair enough to maintain a sense of justice within the crew. The harsh maritime conditions themselves contributed to the severity of pirate justice. On a ship, there was no possibility of imprisonment, no way to banish someone temporarily, and limited resources to waste on lengthy legal procedures. Punishments had to be immediate, decisive, and memorable. The confined space of a ship meant that every crew member would witness these punishments, ensuring maximum psychological impact and serving as constant reminders of the consequences of disobedience. Imagine the claustrophobic atmosphere of a pirate ship, the constant tension, the ever-present threat of mutiny. In such an environment, swift and decisive action was essential to maintaining order. A single act of defiance, if left unpunished, could quickly spread like wildfire, leading to chaos and anarchy. The influence of various cultural traditions also shaped pirate punishment practices. Many pirates had served on ships from different nations, each with its own military traditions and disciplinary methods. Spanish sailors brought knowledge of Inquisition techniques, honed over centuries of religious persecution. British naval personnel contributed their experience with flogging, keel hauling, and other forms of brutal punishment. And former slaves added their understanding of psychological domination, their expertise in breaking the spirit of others. This cultural melting pot created a unique blend of punishment methods that was arguably more comprehensive than any single tradition. Consider the Spanish sailor, raised in a culture where torture and religious persecution were commonplace, bringing his knowledge of Inquisition techniques to the pirate ship. Or the British naval officer, accustomed to the harsh discipline of the Royal Navy, sharing his expertise in flogging and keelhauling. The convergence of these different cultural traditions resulted in a system of punishment that was both innovative and terrifying. Economic factors played a crucial role in shaping these practices as well. Pirates operated on razor-thin margins of survival, where the loss of a single crew member could mean the difference between a successful raid and utter disaster. Punishments had to serve not just as deterrents, but as ways to maintain crew effectiveness. Methods like marooning, which involved abandoning the condemned on a remote island with minimal supplies, conserved ship resources while still delivering harsh justice. Other methods, like gibbeting, which involved displaying the executed corpse in an iron cage, provided long-term psychological benefits that extended far beyond the immediate crew. Consider the economic realities faced by a pirate crew: limited resources, constant risk of capture, and the ever-present threat of starvation. In such an environment, efficiency and resourcefulness were paramount. Punishments had to be designed not only to deter crime, but also to minimize the impact on the crew's overall effectiveness. Marooning, for example, was a cost-effective way of dealing with troublemakers, as it eliminated the need to waste resources on feeding and guarding a prisoner. Gibbeting, on the other hand, served as a long-term deterrent, reminding potential criminals of the consequences of their actions long after the execution had taken place. The religious and superstitious beliefs prevalent among sailors of the era also influenced punishment practices. Many pirates believed that certain crimes brought bad luck to the entire ship, requiring extreme measures to appease supernatural forces. This added a ritualistic element to many executions, where the punishment became not just about maintaining discipline, but about protecting the crew from divine retribution. These beliefs gave even the most brutal punishments a sense of necessity and righteousness that helped crews justify their participation. Consider the deeply ingrained superstitions of sailors in the 17th and 18th centuries, their belief in omens, curses, and the wrath of the sea gods. In such a world, certain crimes, such as blasphemy or the desecration of religious objects, were seen as inviting disaster upon the entire ship. Punishments for these offenses were often imbued with a ritualistic element, designed to appease the offended deities and restore the ship's good fortune. This combination of religious belief, superstition, and the need for discipline created a potent and often terrifying mix. Pirate punishment systems, therefore, were not simply the product of random cruelty, but rather the result of a complex interplay of social, economic, cultural, and religious factors. They reflected the unique challenges and pressures faced by those who lived outside the boundaries of conventional law, and they served as a grim reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human heart when pushed to extremes. The sea, once a symbol of freedom and opportunity, became a stage for a symphony of suffering, a testament to the savage ingenuity of those who sought to impose order in a lawless world. Having explored the origins and influences shaping pirate punishment, let us now delve into the specifics of these brutal practices, a catalog of cruelties designed to instill fear, crush dissent, and maintain absolute control over the pirate crew. We shall examine the methods, the mechanics, and the chilling psychological impact of these punishments, venturing into the darkest corners of the pirate world to uncover the instruments of terror employed with such calculated precision. Prepare yourself for a journey into the heart of darkness, a descent into the abyss of human cruelty. Keel hauling stands as perhaps the most ingeniously cruel punishment ever devised for maritime discipline, a terrifying combination of near drowning and agonizing physical trauma. Imagine being dragged beneath the barnacle-encrusted hull of a ship, your skin flayed by the sharp edges of marine growth, your lungs burning with salt water, your mind reeling in a vortex of pain and panic. This practice involved tying a rope around the victim's waist and dragging them underneath the ship from one side to the other, forcing them to scrape against the rough hull while fighting for breath in the churning water below. The very thought of it sends a shiver down the spine. The preparation for keel hauling was itself a form of psychological torture, a prolonged exercise in dread that could last for hours. The condemned man would be stripped naked and forced to watch as crew members prepared the ropes, checked the wind conditions, and sharpened the barnacles to ensure optimal suffering. Weights were often tied to the victim's feet to prevent them from floating to the surface, prolonging their agony. The rope's length was carefully measured to control how deeply they would be dragged, and the entire crew would gather on deck to witness the proceedings, creating an atmosphere of terror and anticipation. Picture the scene. The naked man, trembling with fear, forced to watch as his executioners prepare the instruments of his torture. The expectant faces of the crew, eager to witness the spectacle. The ominous silence, broken only by the creaking of ropes and the lapping of waves against the hull. The anticipation, the knowledge of what awaits him, is almost as terrifying as the act itself. The physical mechanics of keel hauling were designed to maximize both pain and the chance of survival, a crucial distinction that made this punishment particularly effective as a deterrent. As the victim was thrown overboard, the rope would pull them downward and across the ship's hull, where razor-sharp barnacles and rough wood would tear at their skin. The speed of the drag depended on wind conditions and the captain's whim, with slower speeds increasing the likelihood of drowning, while faster speeds caused more severe lacerations. Imagine the excruciating pain as the barnacles slice into your skin, tearing away flesh with every inch of your passage beneath the ship. The icy salt water stings the open wounds, adding to the agony, while the lack of air causes your lungs to burn with an unbearable intensity. The barnacles that covered ship hulls were nature's own instruments of torture, acting like thousands of tiny blades that would slice and tear at exposed flesh. These marine organisms grew in thick colonies on wooden hulls, creating a surface so rough that even brief contact could cause serious injuries. As victims were dragged across this biological minefield, their skin would be flayed away in strips, leaving bloody trails in the water that often attracted sharks, adding another layer of terror to an already horrifying experience. Breathing during keel hauling required incredible presence of mind and physical endurance, as victims had to time their inhalations during brief moments when they might break the surface. Many men died not from their injuries, but from drowning, as panic and pain made it impossible to coordinate their breathing with the motion of the drag. The salt water that filled their lungs would burn like fire, while the constant submersion and emergence created a disorienting cycle that made survival as much a matter of luck as stamina. Consider the sheer panic of being dragged underwater, the desperate struggle for air, the burning sensation in your lungs as salt water fills your throat. It is a terrifying and disorienting experience, one that would quickly overwhelm even the strongest of swimmers. The duration of keel hauling varied depending on the severity of the crime and the captain's temperament, but most sessions lasted between 2 and 5 minutes, an eternity for the victim, but carefully timed to avoid certain death. Experienced captains knew exactly how long a man could survive this ordeal, and they used this knowledge to calibrate the punishment's severity. Some victims were dragged multiple times, with brief respites between sessions to allow them to regain consciousness and fully experience their punishment. Survival of keel hauling often resulted in permanent disability, as the combination of lacerations, saltwater poisoning, and near drowning typically left victims with chronic breathing problems, infected wounds, and psychological trauma that lasted for the rest of their lives. The visible scars served as permanent reminders of the punishment, marking survivors as men who had faced the ultimate maritime justice and lived to tell the tale. These scars became part of pirate folklore, with survivors gaining a grudging respect from their peers. The psychological impact of keel hauling extended far beyond the immediate victim, creating a culture of fear that permeated every aspect of ship life.
Crew members who witnessed these punishments would carry the memory with them to other ships, spreading tales of the brutality they had seen and reinforcing the reputation of captains who employed such methods. The mere threat of keel hauling was often enough to maintain discipline, as sailors understood that even minor infractions could escalate into this nightmare scenario if they challenged their captain's authority. Keel hauling, in all its terrifying detail, stands as a chilling testament to the ingenuity and cruelty of pirate justice.
Marooning, on the other hand, presented a different kind of terror, a slower, more insidious form of punishment that preyed on the victim's hope and despair. Often described as a slow death in paradise, marooning represented the cruelest form of pirate justice precisely because it offered the illusion of mercy while delivering a fate worse than immediate execution. This punishment involved abandoning the condemned on a remote, uninhabited island with minimal supplies, typically just a pistol with a single shot and a small amount of fresh water. What appeared to be a second chance at life was actually an elaborate form of psychological torture that could extend suffering for weeks or even months. The selection of marooning locations was a calculated decision that revealed the sophisticated cruelty behind this punishment. Pirates chose islands that were visible from shipping lanes, but too small or remote to attract regular visitors. These locations offered just enough resources to sustain life temporarily, creating false hope while ensuring eventual death. The condemned could see potential rescue ships in the distance, their sails billowing in the wind, but had no way to signal them effectively, adding a layer of psychological torture to their physical suffering. Imagine the agonizing frustration of seeing a ship sail past, knowing that rescue is within reach, but being unable to attract its attention. The hope, the despair, the realization that you are utterly alone, these are the torments that marooning inflicted. The supplies provided to marooned victims followed a twisted logic that maximized despair while maintaining the pretense of fairness. The single pistol shot was understood by all involved to be intended for suicide when starvation became unbearable, turning the weapon into both a mercy and a torment. The small water ration, usually just a day's supply, forced immediate rationing decisions that would dominate every moment of the victim's remaining life. Some captains would add a Bible to the supplies, adding mockery to an already cruel punishment. The psychological progression of marooning followed a predictable pattern that pirates understood well, making it an effective deterrent for potential troublemakers. Initial hope would give way to mounting desperation as the victim realized the inadequacy of their supplies and the remoteness of their location. The constant decision-making required for survival, how much water to drink, where to seek shelter, when to use the precious bullet, created mental anguish that was often worse than the physical suffering of hunger and thirst. Environmental factors played a crucial role in determining how long marooned victims would survive, and pirates became expert at predicting these variables. Island in the Caribbean could provide coconuts and rainwater, potentially extending life for weeks, while rocky outcrops in other regions offered no such resources. Weather patterns, seasonal variations, and the presence of dangerous wildlife all factored into the victim's chances of survival, making each marooning a unique form of customized torture. The social isolation of marooning was perhaps its most devastating aspect, as humans are fundamentally social creatures who require interaction for psychological stability. Condemned pirates found themselves completely cut off from human contact, with only their own thoughts for company. This isolation often led to madness long before starvation claimed their lives, with survivors of rescue reporting conversations with imaginary companions and elaborate delusions about rescue ships that existed only in their minds. Some victims of marooning did survive through exceptional resourcefulness or pure luck, and their accounts provide harrowing insights into this brutal punishment. Alexander Selkirk, the inspiration for Daniel Defoe's novel Robinson Crusoe, survived 4 years on a deserted island, but reported severe psychological trauma that persisted long after his rescue. These rare survival stories were well known among pirates and actually enhanced the punishment's effectiveness by demonstrating that survival was theoretically possible while remaining practically unlikely. The aftermath of failed marooning, when victims were eventually rescued, often produced pirates who were either completely broken or hardened beyond recognition.
Those who survived typically displayed extreme loyalty to whoever rescued them, having learned firsthand the consequences of opposing pirate authority. Others became completely unhinged, their minds shattered by months of isolation and desperation. Either outcome served the pirates' purposes, as both responses demonstrated the power of their justice system to transform humans into cautionary tales. Marooning, a slow descent into madness and death, was a chilling example of the psychological sophistication behind pirate justice. Walking the plank, in contrast to keel-hauling and marooning, was less frequently employed, but arguably more psychologically devastating. This method forced victims to participate actively in their own deaths, creating a level of mental anguish that went far beyond simple murder. Imagine being forced to walk a narrow plank into the shark-infested waters of the Caribbean, knowing that each step brings you closer to certain death. The horror of it is almost unbearable. The condemned man had to make the conscious decision to step off the plank, transforming execution into a form of coerced suicide that left lasting impressions on all who witnessed it. The ritualistic nature of walking the plank was carefully designed to maximize psychological impact on both the victim and the watching crew. The plank itself was typically a piece of lumber extended over the ship's side, long enough to prevent the victim from jumping back aboard, but short enough to ensure they couldn't reach the water safely. Crew members would gather around in a ceremonial circle, creating an arena atmosphere that turned the execution into a public spectacle that would be remembered and retold for years to come. The time factor in plank-walking executions was crucial to their psychological effectiveness, as victims were given time to contemplate their fate while being forced to take active steps toward their own death. Unlike other forms of execution that happened quickly, walking the plank required the condemned to overcome their survival instincts repeatedly, first to step onto the plank, then to continue walking despite knowing each step bringing them closer to death. This internal struggle was visible to all observers, creating a powerful deterrent effect. The choice offered to plank-walking victims was illusory but psychologically devastating, as they could technically refuse to walk and accept whatever alternative punishment the captain might devise. However, these alternatives were typically described in such horrific terms that the plank began to seem like mercy. This false choice created additional mental anguish, as victims had to weigh their options while under extreme duress, often leading to complete psychological breakdown before the execution even began. Physical factors enhanced the psychological terror of plank walking, as victims had to confront not just their impending death, but the specific nature of drowning. The sight of sharks circling below, either naturally occurring or attracted by bait thrown overboard, added visceral terror to abstract mortality. The height above the water, the roughness of the seas, and the presence of dangerous marine life all contributed to a uniquely terrifying death that engaged every fear center in the human brain simultaneously. The social dynamics of plank walking created additional layers of psychological manipulation, as victims were often forced to address the crew or make final statements before their execution.
This requirement to speak coherently while facing imminent death often resulted in breakdowns that were as entertaining to bloodthirsty crews as they were educational. Some victims used these final moments to curse their captors, while others begged for mercy, and both responses served the pirates' purposes by demonstrating the absolute power they held over life and death. Variations in plank-walking procedures revealed the sophisticated understanding pirates had of human psychology and their ability to customize punishments for maximum effect. Some captains would have victims blindfolded to prevent them from timing their fall, while others would remove the blindfold at the last moment to force them to see their fate. The plank might be greased to make walking more difficult, or weights might be attached to ensure the victim sank quickly, depending on the captain's desire for prolonged suffering versus immediate death. The rarity of plank walking in historical records actually enhanced its psychological power, as the uncertainty about when and how it might be employed created constant anxiety among pirate crews. Unlike keel hauling or marooning, which had established procedures, walking the plank retained an element of unpredictability that made it more terrifying than more commonly used punishments.
This unpredictability served the pirates' purposes by keeping crew members off balance and unable to prepare mentally for potential punishment. Walking the plank, a forced march towards certain death, was a masterclass in psychological terror, a grim reminder of the pirates' ability to break the human spirit. Gibbeting, finally, represented the pirates' understanding that death itself was not always sufficient punishment. Sometimes, the message required a corpse that could continue serving their purposes long after the victim had died. Imagine the decaying corpse of a pirate, suspended in an iron cage, swaying gently in the wind, a constant reminder of the consequences of defying the pirate code. It is a gruesome and unsettling image designed to instill fear and deter potential criminals. This practice involved displaying executed pirates in iron cages or chains at prominent locations, where their decomposing bodies would serve as permanent warnings to anyone considering a life of piracy. The gibbet cage became a symbol of ultimate defeat, transforming the victim's remains into a public service announcement written in rotting flesh and bleached bone. The construction of gibbet cages was a specialized craft that revealed the technical sophistication behind this brutal practice. These iron frameworks were custom-built to fit the victim's body dimensions, designed to hold a corpse securely while allowing for natural decomposition and air circulation. The cages were typically made from thick iron bars, welded or riveted together, with openings large enough to allow scavenging birds access to the body while preventing the remains from falling out and ruining the display. Location selection for gibbets followed strategic principles that maximized their psychological impact on the maritime community. Popular sites included harbor entrances, lighthouse points, and other prominent coastal features that would be visible to incoming ships from considerable distances. Port Royal in Jamaica featured a gibbet point where dozens of pirate corpses were displayed simultaneously, creating a grotesque forest of iron cages that served as the first sight greeting visitors to one of the Caribbean's most important ports. The process of gibbeting began while the victim was still alive, adding another layer of terror to an already brutal punishment. Condemned pirates would be forced to watch as their custom cage was constructed and installed, giving them time to contemplate their fate while seeing the physical reality of their coming torment. Some were executed before being placed in the gibbet, while others were left to die of exposure and starvation while trapped in their iron prisons, depending on the severity of their crimes and the captain's temperament. The decomposition process visible in gibbet displays created a timeline of decay that served different psychological purposes. As time progressed, fresh corpses generated immediate horror and disgust, while partially decomposed bodies showed the reality of death in graphic detail. Eventually, sun-bleached skeletons provided a more abstract but equally powerful reminder of mortality that could persist for years. Each stage of decay sent a different message to observers, maintaining the effectiveness of the display long after the initial execution. Weather and environmental factors played crucial roles in the gibbet's effectiveness as both punishment and deterrent. Tropical climates accelerated decomposition, creating intense odors that could be detected from considerable distances, while also attracting clouds of insects and scavenging birds that added to the horrific spectacle. Seasonal storms might damage displays or scatter remains, requiring maintenance and occasional replacement of both cages and contents to maintain the desired psychological impact. The social impact of gibbet displays extended far beyond their immediate deterrent effect on potential pirates, influencing entire maritime communities and shaping public attitudes toward piracy. Merchant sailors, naval officers, and civilian passengers all encountered these displays during their travels, carrying stories of what they had seen to ports around the world. This word-of-mouth distribution system amplified the gibbet's psychological reach far beyond its physical location, making it one of the most cost-effective forms of long-term deterrence available to authorities. Documentation from the period reveals that gibbet displays were often accompanied by placards or signs identifying the victim and their crimes, turning the remains into educational exhibits that provided specific lessons about the consequences of particular actions. These displays created a form of public education that was far more memorable than any written law or posted regulation. The combination of visual horror and specific information about the victim's crimes created lasting impressions that influenced behavior for generations of sailors and potential pirates. Gibbeting, a gruesome and enduring reminder of the consequences of piracy, was the final and perhaps most chilling weapon in the pirates' arsenal of terror. Having examined the catalog of cruelties employed by pirates and explored the origins and influences shaping their brutal system of justice, we must now consider the enduring legacy of these practices, the echoes of the past that continue to resonate in maritime law, military discipline, and even popular culture. The pirates may be long gone, their ships sunk, their treasure plundered, but their methods of punishment, their understanding of human psychology, and their chilling effectiveness in maintaining order through terror continue to haunt us to this day. The case of Captain Charles Vane provides one of the most well-documented examples of pirate justice in action, illustrating how these brutal practices were applied even to high-ranking pirates who fell from grace. Vane, once a powerful captain in the Caribbean, was eventually captured and faced trial in Jamaica in 1721. Historical records from the proceedings reveal how his own former crew members testified about the punishments he had administered, including detailed accounts of keel haulings and maroonings that he had ordered during his years of piracy. These testimonies, meticulously recorded in court documents, paint a vivid picture of Vane as a ruthless and uncompromising leader, willing to employ extreme measures to maintain control over his crew. The fact that his own men were willing to testify against him speaks volumes about the fear and resentment he inspired and the breakdown of trust that ultimately led to his downfall. Edward Lowe, known as one of the most sadistic pirates of the Golden Age, left behind a trail of documented brutality that helps us understand the systematic nature of pirate punishment. Court records and survivor testimonies describe his use of torture methods that went beyond even the brutal standards of his contemporaries. In one documented case from 1722, Lowe ordered a merchant captain's lips to be cut off and cooked, then forced the man to eat them before killing him. These accounts, recorded in both colonial court proceedings and survivor testimonies, demonstrate how individual pirates could escalate beyond even the established codes of their profession. Lowe's extreme cruelty, his willingness to inflict pain for its own sake, sets him apart from even the most hardened pirates and serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. The trial records of Black Bart's crew, captured after Bartholomew Roberts' death in 1722, provide unprecedented insight into the internal workings of pirate justice systems. Over 150 pirates were tried in Cape Coast Castle, and their testimonies revealed the complex codes that govern their ship. The records describe specific punishments for different offenses. Desertion resulted in marooning, striking another crew member led to keel hauling, and theft from the common fund warranted death. These legal documents, preserved for centuries in colonial archives, offer a rare glimpse into the day-to-day life of a pirate crew and the rules and regulations that govern their behavior. They reveal that pirate society, despite its lawless reputation, was governed by a surprisingly complex system of laws and customs designed to maintain order and ensure the survival of the community. The diary of colonial official William Byrd II contains graphic descriptions of gibbet displays he encountered during his travels through the Caribbean in the early 18th century. His writings provide contemporary accounts of the physical reality of these displays, including details about the smell, the sounds made by the wind passing through the cages, and the psychological impact on local populations. Byrd's observations, as an educated outsider, gives us valuable perspective on how these practices appeared to those not directly involved in pirate culture. His descriptions, both vivid and unsettling, capture the horror and disgust that these displays inspired and the lasting impact they had on the landscape and the collective memory of the region. Spanish colonial records from Cartagena document the interrogation of surviving pirates captured during raids on Spanish treasure fleets, providing insights into punishment practices from the victim's perspective. These documents, preserved in the Archive of the Indies in Seville, include testimonies from pirates who described witnessing keel haulings, maroonings, and other punishments aboard various ships. The Spanish authorities were particularly interested in understanding pirate organization and discipline, leading to detailed questioning about punishment practices that might otherwise have gone unrecorded. These records offer a valuable counterpoint to the official accounts, providing a glimpse into the fear and suffering experienced by those who were subjected to pirate justice. They reveal the human cost of piracy and the lasting trauma inflicted on its victims. The memoirs of Alexander Exquemelin, a former pirate turned chronicler, provide first-hand accounts of punishments he witnessed during his time with Henry Morgan's forces. His book, The Buccaneers of America, published in 1668, includes detailed descriptions of torture methods and executions that he personally observed. Exquemelin's accounts are particularly valuable because they come from someone who participated in pirate society rather than observing it from outside, giving us insights into how these practices were perceived by those who lived under their threat daily. His memoirs, though sometimes sensationalized, offer a unique and intimate portrayal of pirate life and the brutal realities of their system of justice. They reveal the psychological toll that these practices took on them and the moral compromises that were necessary to survive in such a violent environment. Naval records from HMS ships pursuing pirates contain official reports of gibbet displays encountered during patrols, providing military perspective on these punishment practices. Captain Woodes Rogers, the governor of the Bahamas, who led efforts to suppress piracy in the region, wrote extensively about the psychological warfare aspects of these displays and their effectiveness in deterring recruitment to pirate crews. His correspondence with the Admiralty reveals how authorities understood and attempted to counter the pirates' use of terror as a tool of social control. These records demonstrate the strategic importance of pirate punishment and the efforts made by authorities to neutralize its psychological impact. They reveal the understanding that pirate justice was not merely a matter of individual cruelty, but a calculated strategy designed to maintain control and attract new recruits. The testimony of rescued victims provides some of the most harrowing accounts of pirate punishment practices, preserved in court records from piracy trials throughout the early 18th century. These accounts describe not just the physical aspects of various punishments, but their psychological effects on both victims and witnesses. One particularly detailed account from a merchant sailor who survived keel hauling describes the long-term effects of his injuries and the psychological trauma that persisted years after his rescue.